Good morning, everybody. This is going to be the first part in a 5-part series walking through some very basic modules for Java and Spring Boot. So, the context here is a few folks in my network have asked how to get started with Java development, and so this little project will serve as something is a tutorial to get you dangerous enough to where you can start understanding how the parts fit together and what to go look up in order to build larger production scale applications. So we have 5 modules we're going to cover. Module 1 is your basic hello world, which is just going to spin up a little Spring Boot server that will talk to you if you poke one of its endpoints. Module 2 is going to be a little more exciting. We're actually going to be returning objects that will get serialized to JSON, both as get and posts. And then module 3, we're just going to write a simple unit test for said web server. Module 4 is going to be actually going through all of the CRUD APIs, so create, update, get, delete, all that good stuff. And then this module, the web server will be manipulating data in an in-memory database. We'll actually be using H2. And then module 5 will be taking a simple web server and throwing it in a Docker container. So should you wish, you can go grab this code. This is a public repo, so you can clone it down and start from here. However, I'm going to be starting from scratch just so we can get an idea of how this all works, right? Something I do want to call out is I am running off of an M1 MacBook. So setup on M1s is a little different than if you're running on an Intel Mac, and these tutorials also make the assumption that you have a development environment set up. So things like your Xcode toolchain, Homebrew, a terminal of choice, right? You're also going to need Java, you're going to need Maven. You won't need JavaScript, but the point that I'm after here is in the event you don't have a MacBook setup, I would highly advise checking out my other little help document. I'll put a link to this in the YouTube description. This walks you through how to get everything set up on a Mac. This handles M1s elegantly, and most of the steps here are almost identical to Intel, so it should be relatively smooth sailing. So, that out of the way, let's get started and build us a server. So first thing I'm going to do is come over to my desktop. We are going to make a directory to store this project in. Actually, you know what, let's not do it on the desktop. Let's actually do it where all the code goes. So we are going to jump over to coffee code and creatine, that's me. We're going to go under repositories. We are going to make a new one, and we are going to call this demo1 tutorial video. Alright, there we go. And now we're going to come back over here to Intellij, and we're going to open that directory up. So root, repositories, what do we just call this? Demo1 tutorial video. We're going to open this up. Alright, let's full screen this. We got enough real estate, we can take advantage of it. Okay, so for those who are not familiar, this is Intellij. This is my IDE of choice. You could also use Visual Studio Code or numerous others, Eclipse if you wanted to, but we're going to use Intellij today. So I'm going to go right click, new, I'm going to go module. We are going to call this demo1. My, let's say, group is going to be com.coffeecodecreatine. Let's say education. Right, demo1, we will use JDK 14 and Java 11. JDK 14 is under OpenAdopt, so works reasonably well. Java 11 also works reasonably well. We could use Java 17. That is, quote, latest and greatest as of this point in time, but most people are probably still working on Java 8 or 11. So that's what we're going to go with. We are going to package is a jar, and we are going to be using Maven today. If y'all are interested in Gradle, let me know, I can go over that, but pretty much the same thing. And we're just going to initialize a Spring project. So we're going to hit next. We're going to use Spring Boot 2.7.0, so nothing too exciting there. And yeah, we'll just go bone stock, so to speak. Alright, so then what's going to happen here is this is going to load up, which works pretty well. And then we'll go over the nice little files that this project gives us. Alright, so let's close out Maven. Let's come over here and explore source. We have all of our Maven files. Those aren't particularly interesting. So let's just go from top down. We have our Maven directory. That's a Maven wrapper. We have a git ignore. This is used for, I guess, your source control. This will ignore all of your generated files no one cares about. We have a help markdown. We're not interested in this, so we'll delete it. Delete it anyway. Maven goodness, and then our POM. POMs are important. This kind of handles all of your dependencies. So for example, inside of here we have our Spring Boot starter dependency and we have Spring Boot starter test. So this allows us to hit the ground running. We are going to need to add some goodies here later. For example, we will need Spring Web, or Spring Boot Web, I should say. But we'll get those added in a little later on. Under source, under main, under Java, we have our demo 1 application. This is our main class. This is where quite literally the application starts from. Right now, if we were to run this, we could. This application would start up, the main method would run, and then the application would close, and that's pretty much where the story ends. So we need to add some stuff to it. Under resources, we have our application properties that are empty, but this is where we would start putting in our configuration. So for example, if we wanted our server to run on port 8081 as opposed to the default 8080, that's where this would go. And then we just have a basic test, which really doesn't do anything other than invoke a load context, which we're not worried about this just yet. So let's get started. So the first thing that we are going to need is our Spring Boot Web. So let's go ahead and get that added. And so something I will tell you guys, if you are just learning out, you could go to Maven and look up Spring Boot Web and copy the POM, but where was I going with that? Copying and pasting code is a good way to not remember what you're doing or not learn what you're doing. So we're just going to go longhand and type all this out. So we want org spring framework, God, that's hard to say, .boot, and then here we want Spring Boot starter web. So let's go Spring Boot starter web. Cool stuff. And then in theory, this should just pull from our Spring Boot 2.7.0, so we don't necessarily need a version here. So we can save that. Refresh our Maven dependencies. And so there's a handful of ways you can do different operations with Maven, especially whenever you're using different IDEs. So if you want to refresh your dependencies, you can come over here, click your project and hit refresh. That's what I just did. Or if you have a terminal somewhere, right, what you can do is just run like a Maven clean install, and that'll effectively do the same thing. So if I came over here into demo 1 and I run Maven clean install, that would do the same thing. This would pull down all of your dependencies. That actually fails to build, which is interesting. I wouldn't have expected that to do that. Let's see what we have going on. Goal specified requires to execute. There is no POM. Really? Oh, we need to go into the actual module. Sorry. I was running from the root directory, and it is correct. There was, in fact, no POM there. So we load up our singular test, which does a whole lot of nothing, and we build our code, right? It's all good there. So, let's go ahead and kick off our main method here. And as we said earlier, I don't know what button I just clicked. I think that was wrong with coverage. This will start and then very quickly finish out. I think. Debug. I hit debug. Okay, so it won't stop on me, but that's okay. But the point here is the application spins up, loads up our context, and doesn't really do a whole lot. So let's go ahead and add a controller which will allow us to start exposing out endpoints. So if we go package and we go, let's name it controller. All right, and create us, let's call this demo1 controller. This is where we will actually start exposing our REST endpoints that allow us to talk to the server. So the way this is going to work is first we need to annotate this with REST controller. What this tells Spring Boot is that this class here is going to expose out some endpoints, and that needs to be available to the server. As of note, anything that you annotate with REST controller needs to be either at the same level or nested below your root application. So if you had this application buried in the controller folder and this demo1 controller outside, this would not work. Spring Boot gives us a lot of magical help, which is great when it works. Can be a little frustrating when it doesn't. So then we're going to create a get mapping. We are just going to call this hello world, right? And then we'll have it return a string. We will call this method hello world. No arguments, and then we'll go return hello world. Okay, so what did we just do? We created a REST controller to expose some endpoints. We have created a method that returns a string hello world, and we have annotated it with a get mapping, right, hello world. So what this will do, right, is at localhost colon 8080 slash hello world, our server should respond back with just a simple string. So let's go ahead and start this up and see what takes place. So we're going to go ahead and start our demo application. Start a demo application in a hair under 2 seconds. And so now what we can do is we can do a handful of things. We can come over here to Postman, and let's say that we just want to create, let's close out all these. As you can see, I've created a couple different collections. Also worth noting, these collections are in the source code for the project itself. So if we go localhost 8080 hello world and send it, we get hello world back, and we get acknowledgement from our server. Right, all the same, if we wanted to, just as a bit more obvious form of proof, we could log out. Hello from logs. Run this again. And we'll get hello world here, and we will get hello from logs here. And really, that is all there is to it. That is a basic Spring Boot server with a REST endpoint. To build on top of this in Module 2, what we're going to start doing is, rather than having just a get call, we're going to create a post which will allow us to pass data in, and we're also going to start returning some JSON so that we can actually parse this easily. But that concludes video 1.